Next up, I'd like to invite Sunny Jones from the Oregon Department of Agriculture, who drove down from Salem tonight to talk to you guys. So big round of applause.
Hello. It's nice to see law enforcement with a sense of humor. Usually when they pack a gun, their sense of humor went out the door. So, whoops. It is really bright up here, just so you all know. Couple things, I might try and address a couple of the questions that came up earlier that overlap with my program. Some of you have met me before. I won't be giving the same presentation you heard in the past. I really appreciate your time. Today, we're going to talk about what a pesticide is. Many of you, if you were here, I think it was June, Grant Jackson with our pesticides program came and spoke to you. I'm trying not to repeat the presentation he gave to you, but there's going to be a little bit of overlap. We're going to talk about reading a pesticide label and the guide list a little bit. We're going to talk about adulterated pesticide products and fertilizers. We're going to talk about biostimulants and what to do if you think you have an adulterated product or drift. Just so you know, I'm the Cannabis Policy Coordinator with the Department of Ag. I work on everything cannabis related, so that includes hemp, which the department regulates directly. We do not regulate marijuana directly, other than where it falls into some of our programs. Why do you push the down to go forward? I don't know. So, Yeah, there you go. That would make more sense to me. So what is a pesticide? I'm going to totally geek out on you. Anything that kills, repels, or mitigates a pest. Chemicals. We're talking about chemicals, natural or man-made. They also include plant growth regulators. Pesticides are regulated by the US EPA, and then in the state of Oregon, the Oregon Department of Agriculture has delegated authority for pesticide regulation. So it's kind of an umbrella term for herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, rodenticides, disinfectants, so anything you're using to clean your surfaces or sterilize, those are going to be registered pesticides. And then, like I said, the one that always gets folks is the plant growth regulators. So when you're taking your clones and you're dipping them in that thing and then you're planting them, that's going to be a registered pesticide. When Erica and I were talking about what I wanted to share tonight, she said, how about reading a label? You know, just the very basics of what's on a pesticide label. So I picked one of the products off of the guide list. This particular one happens to say that it's OMRI listed. I'd like to address the lady's question about organic products. Ma'am, sitting in the back next to the video guy on your computer. Okay. I want to address your question about organic. So just because something is organic does not mean a pesticide was used on it. Organic means that if they used a pesticide, it's naturally occurring. So for example, pyrethrins, which is the active ingredient here, and there's not a chance that y'all can read that, is a naturally occurring insecticide derived from chrysanthemum flowers. It is a chemical that kills insects. Therefore, it is a pesticide, but because it is naturally occurring, it can be registered as for use in organic production. So just to clarify organic. Organic is under USDA, not FDA, just to make that part clear. And because it's a federal agency, even though people like Oregon Tilth do certification, they do it as a contractor for USDA basically, they have to abide by those federal regulations. So that's why if you do want to market your product as having organic-like or natural occurring inputs, you need to go with one of those other companies that were mentioned earlier. So every pesticide is going to have a list of active ingredients. Most of them are going to be registered with the EPA unless they're what they call 25B, which are things like cinnamon oil, lemongrass, thyme oil. You've seen some of those products. They do not have to be registered with the EPA as long as they list everything in that bottle. This particular one is 1.4% pyrethrins, 98% other ingredients, they don't qualify for the 25B. Pyrethrins isn't on the list, and they don't have to tell you what those other 98% of the bottle is. So therefore, in really tiny letters, it's going to have something that says EPA reg number, and it's going to be a series of numbers with dashes. That tells you it's registered with the EPA, that tells the state what is in that bottle for active ingredients, whether it's been registered, and the name. So those are some of the things that you might want to be looking at on a product when you're in the store. It'll also help you look on our guide list and make sure that you're using something that is legal. Our guide list has nothing to do with whether or not it is safe. It's whether it's legal for use on cannabis. And then you're going to see things, directions for use, environmental hazards. This particular product is highly toxic to bees. So if you're using it, you want to make sure that you're applying it early in the morning or late in the evening. You make sure that you don't have weeds in your grow site that are blooming, that bees are going to be visiting. That's one way to help prevent any issues. So those are things that you need to take into consideration. You might purposely have weeds growing with bees because you want pollination or something else going on. You want to be cognizant of that and be aware before you spray this product in the middle of the day when the bees are actively foraging. It's going to have first aid information on it. It's going to have a precautionary statement. You see in big, bold, capital letters, this says caution. When the EPA registers a product, as it stands in the bottle, they're going to assign a signal word of either caution, warning, or danger that tells you the relative toxicity of the product as it is in the bottle. This is one that you dilute down, so it's going to get less toxic in theory when you dilute it down. But if you're looking at something that says warning, you might want to be sure that you look for any personal protective equipment. Does it have any directions about wearing glasses or gloves, long sleeves? I don't mix this kind of stuff in tennis shoes, right? Because it's going to soak through your shoes, and then it's held next to your skin. Pyrethrins may be naturally occurring. If you're at all allergic to chrysanthemums or have kind of a ragweed allergy, you might experience some skin irritation if you were to get this on your skin. Those are all things to keep in mind. This particular product has very specific lists for directions for use. Do not apply in a way that will contact workers or other people. Don't make applications during the rain. Don't allow children, adults, pets to enter the treated area until sprays have dried. This is a product for outdoor use. It would not be appropriate to use this in an indoor grow. So just because it's on the guide list doesn't mean that you get to spray it willy-nilly on whatever cannabis you're growing. You still need to follow the label directions. Talking about some products are going to have what they call a pre-harvest interval. It'll tell you how many days before you plan on harvesting you can spray. Some of them will say right up to day of harvest. Some of them might say 2 days. I would go, if there is a pre-harvest interval on there, obviously cannabis is not going to be on this label yet because the feds don't recognize it. If it has multiple pre-harvest intervals, I'd go with the longest one. Some of them may have what they call REIs, or restricted entry interval. That means if you spray, you have to stay out of the area, and it'll tell you 24 hours, 48 hours. Again, that's to make sure that the product has dried and adhered to the plant and isn't going to be something that you come in contact with if you go into that area. A lot of what you guys have available to you probably don't have those, but those are things you need to be thinking about just in case. Another question that I had was, okay, cannabis isn't on here. How the heck do I know how to dilute this down, right? What rate do I use it at? Well, this particular one has one dilution rate for all the crops that they list on here. So you would follow that dilution rate. If there were multiples, you pick the one that's closest to your crop. If they list herbs, I'd probably use an herb dilution rate, not an apple or fruiting trees dilution rate, for example. Make sure that you're below the maximum rate labeled for any crop. You don't want to go above that. You're going to be in violation of state law. And depending on what it is, you could be running up against testing regulation issues. So I've just pulled out a listing from this particular label of what some of the crops they listed were. If you remember about the guide list, it has to be labeled for, really broadly labeled for crops. It can't be specific to a certain crop. So this one says herbs and spices, including. If it didn't have that including, this product would not be appropriate for use on cannabis because the crop has to be on the label. Because it says including, it's like, well, you know, you could use this on any of these. These are just examples. If it said allspice, blah, 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 you know, limited to, or just listed those specific, you know, basil, oregano, parsley, then it wouldn't be appropriate to use this product on cannabis. So it has to be really broad. That's where this one saying including leaves it open enough that we could say, yeah, we kind of consider cannabis an herb or spice in the way that we use it. So that's how these products are getting on ODA's guide list. So there's about 300 products on there. The first criteria is that if the EPA has looked at the chemical, did they exempt it from the requirement of a tolerance? And that's how much residue can be on that crop when you harvest it. So they've looked at things like pyrethrins and said, it's low enough in toxicity, we're going to not require a tolerance. Another reason it doesn't require a tolerance is it breaks down very quickly in the environment. Those of you who have used it probably realize that you have to spray a little more frequently with pyrethrins than you might something else. And then this broad label language that doesn't limit you to certain crops. So those are the things that you need to be looking for when you're looking at a pesticide label. What is the toxicity? What are some requirements on that label to protect myself or my employees? Is it allowed for indoor use or outdoor use, depending on what I'm looking at it for? And then does it have a chemical in there that I think is going to be effective against the pest that I have a problem with? OG Analytical actually alerted ODA to the whole Guardian situation. I think you guys are familiar with that. This is one of those products that they were marketing as 25B, i.e. they said they don't have to register it with EPA. It was cinnamon oil and lemongrass, right? You could cook with it, and it worked really well. If you read the web reviews, you sprayed it once and you had no more problems with mites. Really? And it cost $410 for this 16-ounce bottle. And it was cinnamon oil and lemongrass. I don't know about you, but I'm calling BS on that. So this is what we call an adulterated product. This was one of the first ones. ODA has been fighting this fight for a number of years. Ultimately, EPA has the authority to go after these companies. And I honestly think in the past, they kind of said, yeah, we'll look at it. But they also went, it's used on cannabis. It's not something worth us pursuing. We have enough states in the country now saying, that's incorrect. You need to pursue this. Anybody could be using this. I could be putting this on my tomatoes at home and feeding it to my kid, and I have the right to know if it has an illegal pesticide in it or not. So they're starting to pay better attention. We're working together with Washington and Colorado and other states that have legalized cannabis as well, and we're pushing it. But this is what we call an adulterated product. So we see this in products like this that are 25B. So they're saying we don't have to tell, they thought they were good, but they spiked it. And I did one of those government things and put a really ugly 8x10 up here that you can't read. But basically there's about 14 or 15 products on here that Washington went and sampled. Oregon has done the same. And some of them are pesticides. So remember, anything that kills, repels, or mitigates. So insecticide, fungicide, etc. Some of them are nutrients or fertilizers. When something has like 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, and it makes your plant really, really bushy, that's probably a plant growth regulator in there illegally. These are things that I want you to have warning bells going off in your head and like, maybe I should be asking more questions. Maybe I should call Sunny at ODA and say, what's up with this product? Salicylic acid, that's one that's showing up. Paclo, see if I, yeah, paclobutranol, right? It's
Paclobutrazol.
Yeah, so that's something that's showing up. Very low levels, but again, it's in those nutrients or fertilizers that cost you an arm and a leg, but make your plants really bushy. Some of these companies maybe don't make any claims on the product label, but if you go to their website, they might have claims, or they might have somebody who wrote in and said, wow, this product does X, Y, and Z. Those are still claims under the EPA, and we can turn them into the EPA for you. So if you know of products like that, I want to hear about it. It's really important. Your industry has been, unfortunately, black market for a long time, and a lot of these companies were getting away with this because when you're supplying a black market industry, how do you get people to speak up and listen to? You're not black market anymore, and you don't need to put up with this. This is really important. So, unfortunately, you're gonna have to help bring them up to your level, and it's gonna be a little bumpy along the way, but that is what ODA is here to do to help you. So I really encourage you. I know there was some conversation maybe when Grant was here before about a product that the website was maybe making some recommendations or some claims. Those are things we want to hear about. I think you had mentioned that to me. So 15 products. I have an email listserv that whenever we find out one of these products has an illegal pesticide in it, I send it out to you, let you know. If it's on our guide list, we pull it off of our guide list, and I let you know that it's been pulled off the guide list. I also let you know when we add products to the guide list. There's about 12,000, maybe 13,000 registered pesticides in the state of Oregon. So if there's something that you would like to use and you want to know why it's not on the guide list, call myself or the pesticides program, and we can help you figure that out. It could be we missed it. We are human. And there might be good reason why it should be on the guide list, or it might be new and they may not have gotten it through our process yet. So one of the last things I want to talk to you about is the biostimulants. So ODA also has a fertilizer program within our pesticides program. Fertilizers are not subject to the same kind of registration requirements that pesticides are. However, ODA does register them. We make sure that when they claim a guarantee, that they have tests to show that it's that guarantee. So if it's 1616, for example, they better be able to show that it's 16 nitrogen, 16 NPK, phosphorus and potassium. They have to show that they've gone through heavy metal testing, because that can be an issue in nutrients and fertilizers. So we have information on our website about all of that. But the other thing that's kind of become a big thing, and Oregon is leading the charge in this as well, is the biostimulants that are claiming bacteria or other natural occurring organisms. And so how do you know that there's actually what's in there that they're claiming? ODA is starting to go and test some of those. And the test results haven't been all that great. This is from 2014. So we sampled 11 products that claimed to have bacillus species in them. 2 of them met the guarantee. Most of them were dead or nowhere near the number that they said were in there. We looked at 4 products that claimed trichoderma species. None of them met the guarantee. And Pseudomonas species, that year we sampled 6, and again, none of them met the guarantee. So this is stuff we went and bought off the shelf, took to our lab, and had them run those samples on. So on our website are reports for like 13, 14, 15, 16. So you can go and look, see what values they did have, if they had any, were they alive. So, you know, it's a consumer protection program more than a human health program. But I think that's pretty important for you guys to know, because these products aren't cheap either. So keep that in mind. So I have some shortened URLs. I don't know if you can actually read them. It's bit, and that's as bit, like bit.do for both of them, and then it's /pesticides-cannabis. And that'll take you to the page that has the guide list on it. You can also sign up for the listserv there. I also have one, if you want to go look at that fertilizer information, it's the same beginning part and then just fertilizer reports. You can also see what fertilizers are registered in the state of Oregon. So if you have questions about that. I also brought, and they're up here on the table and we can move them. Some of you may have seen this diagram. It kind of shows you what ODA does in relation to cannabis regulations. It has my phone number on the bottom, so don't hesitate to call me. It also has our cannabis web address that then has links to these other things. So what happens when you think you have a product that's adulterated? You call me, I hook you up with the right person. What happens if you are an outdoor grow and you think that you have pesticide drift onto your cannabis? That is a lot of what our pesticide enforcement program does. We inspect for drift, so you call me. We actually have an inspector, 2 inspectors based out of Springfield, and I'm gonna suggest to Erica that maybe one of them come and do a presentation on our enforcement program in the future. We usually have a sense of humor too, and we don't pack guns, but it's important. You might actually deal with them because we get a lot of neighbor-to-neighbor complaints. Lieutenant was talking about odor complaints. Those come to us as well because people assume that if it's agriculture and there's an odor, that ODA deals with it. There's no odor regulations, so we suggest also that people are good neighbors and talk to each other. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to happen in this day and age. But yeah, so if a drift happens, we're gonna come out, we're gonna talk to you, we're gonna meet with your neighbor. We're likely to sample your product, we're gonna sample theirs, and see if there's a gradient showing that drift occurred. We're pretty easy to work with. We wanna help you, this is important. It is everybody's responsibility to maintain any pesticide application on their own property. So if you drift, you're just as naughty and would be subject to the same rules. If you're a homeowner and you drift, you're subject to the same rules. And then one other thing, a gentleman was talking about honey sticks. Food safety is one of the programs that ODA plays a major role in. We do have a food safety handout now that talks about what the general requirements are, gives you an idea of what you need to make sure you have in place. If you're making anything that goes into food, it's going to need to be licensed through our food safety program, from extracts all the way down to the retailer. So if you know somebody that could use that, please take a copy of that as well. And I'm going to end there and let Erica pass the microphone around if you have questions.
Sunny, thank you so much. And those handouts are right here for you folks.
And I apologize if that was like little bits of everything, but 15 minutes doesn't give me much time to go in depth, plus it's kind of geeky nerd out.
Hi, that was a super awesome presentation. I really appreciated your fervor and disdain for unlabeled products and things of that nature. I wanted to ask if you had any advice on how we can start to leverage the political power of OSU as a land-grant institution so that we can develop best practice, so that we don't have a bunch of people spraying pesticides, so that we know how much fertilizer to put there, because that seems to be tricky ground.
Right. So his question was around, in case you couldn't hear him, around getting OSU to work with growers and to start doing some research into what best practices are. That's a great question. OSU is really risk adverse when it comes to the fact that they get federal funding. I think that if you can help them with their hemp program, that will bleed over into traditional marijuana as well. They tried to start a hemp program, research program this year. They got licensed through the DEA. DEA says that any hemp seeds in Oregon are not legal and that they had to get them from, I think, overseas and bring them in legally. because we have a seed saving provision in our hemp law, a lot of the growers in other states were uncomfortable, or other countries were uncomfortable, and so it didn't work this year to get quote unquote legal hemp seed into the state, but they are working on that. The other thing is the legislature required a best practices task force, and they're recommending that a private research institution be put together. So if that's something that you're interested in, you should follow that. There's also the possibility for something called a commodity commission through the Department of Ag. Growers would pay into that commodity program. The department administers that, and then the commission could decide that they want to use that money to spend it towards research. So those are some of the options available. Industry has to decide that they want to do a commodity commission though. ODA doesn't say, oh, we need a commodity commission for this. We're going to start taxing you. It's something industry has to come together and say, this is something we want to do as a whole. Right now, there's still a lot of division within the industry, and I'm not sure if folks are ready to come together, but that would be an option. And then you could fund research through that. Yeah.
So I didn't want to distract you, but you did start with your first slide talking about legalization. I was the lead speaker at the Oregon State Senate in 2009 on the industrial hemp bill. At that time, we had not legalized recreational. We had not really implemented the medical program to the degree that we had. So we thought that it was a good idea to base the concept of the industrial hemp law on the Canadian laws. However, it turns out that after asking everywhere that I know that I can, now that we have legalized medical and recreational, and the state has said that CBD is a valid industrial hemp product, why are we including an requirement for low THC with industrial hemp? I'm an expert on this, and I see no connection between low THC and industrial hemp.
I know, I've heard you at the hemp meetings before. The feds, as you know, have determined that in order to meet the designation for industrial hemp, that it has to be below the 0.3% THC. So we are following the federal guidelines for that.
Can you tell me why? Can you tell me what it means? The truth of it is, if you want the best hemp fiber that you can have in terms of tensile strength, for example, you want to grow high THC, and you don't even want to let it go to seed to get the best fiber that you can get.
I certainly understand, and this is a conversation you have had with our hemp program multiple times. It's not something that I would like to get into with you this evening in this group. Thank you.
All right, we've got another one over here. Coming your way.
I'm Elvie Musica, and I received so-called medical marijuana from the federal government. You supply the other half. And the half I get from them, 3-4 years ago, they sent me some 2% THC. That was hemp. I like wearing my hemp, but it didn't do a thing for my glaucoma. It destroyed the work we had done for 37 years, so I'm not happy about that. But what I really wanted to ask you is Abbott. I know one of my friends who was a very high-profile activist who grew some fine weed out of Hayward, California, and used it for years. Ended up with a serious nervous disease that actually killed her. And there were others, and I had heard that in Oregon you had stopped the use of Abbott years ago. Is it still prohibited? I certainly hope so.
Okay, so your question is about Abbott. Abbott, yeah. So Abbott is one of the trade names for products that contain abamectin. It has never been legal for use on cannabis, and it still is not legal for use on cannabis. So that would not be an appropriate product for folks to be using. You're welcome.
Other questions for Sunny? Yeah.
That last gentleman in the conversation, you're talking about the federal law versus state laws. You're a state agency, so why the heck are you paying any attention to federal law? I'm just curious.
That isn't something that I can answer,
Okay.
but that is what the state legislature has decided is industrial hemp for Oregon as well.
No, I'm just talking about laws,
Correct.
legal laws and stuff about anything.
Your state legislature makes those laws, and they adopted the same level as the designation for industrial hemp.
Why do your agencies pay attention to federal law on pot?
My agency is following the law that the state legislature in Oregon set.
I've got a question for you, Sunny.
Yeah.
If you could help me understand a little bit more on the labels in respect to interval before safe harvest. So if the product is listed for greenhouse or outdoor use only, and I've got an indoor grower who wants to use that product, my intuition says I don't have the intensity of UV light, I don't have the rain, wind, water exposure. So is it not safe to use that days to harvest interval for an indoor grower off that label?
So it wouldn't be legal to use regardless indoor, regardless of what that pre-harvest interval is. You want to make sure that you're using something that's labeled for indoor use, not something that's labeled for outdoor use.
Gotcha. Is that pretty rare with the indoor? I feel like I don't see that often.
See indoor use labels? I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll dig a little deeper.
Yeah, and I can help you look at those labels if you need help. But a lot of times, in traditional pesticides, indoor use products assume that there isn't going to be those breakdown factors that you're talking about, sunlight, bacteria, water, and so they're going to be at lower rates perhaps. They might have different other ingredients because you're going to be coming in contact with it. The potential is higher to come in contact with it as a human because you're in an enclosed space. So those are some of the things that the EPA takes into account when they make the determination about whether it can be used indoors or not.
Thank you, that really clarifies that. Thank you.
Hi, can you speak to the difference between OMRI and CDFA certifications?
So OMRI is a company here in Eugene. They're a private company that determines if a chemical can be used for organic production. So they look at the USDA rules and determine if that would meet those. So you can certainly use things that are OMRI listed. Doesn't mean that it's going to be on our guide list. There's OMRI listed chemicals that do have tolerances established through the EPA. So they're naturally occurring, but they may not break down as quickly. They may have higher toxicity. Botulism is naturally occurring, but it's something we don't want to be coming in contact with. So there's OMRI, and then the certification, I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
CDFA?
CDFA?
That's the California certification. Apparently it's higher than OMRI.
Okay, I'm not familiar with it. So there's a number of agencies that can certify for the USDA for organic certification, and they might be adding additional criteria to their certification. So that could be part of it.
I just heard CDFA is more strict, apparently. So.
Yeah, sorry.
Any last questions for Sunny? Ooh, one in the back.
The other thing about organic, so you can't market your cannabis as organic or your food product as organic, but you certainly can say it was made with organic ingredients. So you can say the flour, the sugar, etc., are organic when on your food label. So that's something else to keep in mind. Yes, sir.
You were talking about bad players that were blacklisted, and one of those was SNS 217. Web search says that's now off your blacklist. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It was a little hard to tell on that 8x10, but
Right.
I have need for spider-mite control right now, and that being blacklisted is a big hole in several people's here's arsenal. And knowing that it is not blacklisted was just something I wanted to share with everybody here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Washington sampled, and they found a chemical in there. And unfortunately, their lab results weren't to the standard that they should have been. And so I had initially sent out information saying that we had issued a stop sale on that product. I also sent out a follow-up email saying there was a mistake. Sure. I'd rather tell you that we think there's a problem and find out later that I made a mistake than not tell you about something and have you run into trouble with it. And it's new for us as well to notify you and let you know when we run into those issues. So I sincerely apologize, but my goal is to be as clear and open with you as possible.
Thank you. One last question, Sunny.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can answer this question or not, but I come from a place of service and I want to, provide the best service for people that I come into contact with. I had a grower that I met with who was saying that his neighbor was spraying some sort of pesticide on his crop and his neighbor wouldn't give him information. I recommended for him to contact the authorities to share this information with the authorities so it's at least on record. This person was not comfortable calling the authorities, and I'm wondering if you have a suggested avenue.
So there's a couple points there. Just because somebody is spraying a pesticide doesn't mean they're doing anything illegal. So I can see my neighbor spraying, I may not like it, but that's not anything that any agency can follow up on. Now, if I see my neighbor spraying and I think that there's droplets coming on my side of the fence, or I'm sitting on my back deck and I feel a mist coming on me, that's something that ODA can follow up on. Odor doesn't even necessarily mean that drift has occurred, but you can certainly file reports with the department. We have an online form that people can file complaints. They can choose to be anonymous. It does mean that we can't contact them back to tell them what we determined. But the other thing is we're not law enforcement. So we're going to talk to them. We're going to encourage them to talk to their neighbor. Obviously, it didn't work in this situation. That happens many times. We might go out and contact the neighbor. If the person who spoke to you was to call us and say, this is what's going on, we talk to them about what their rights are. And then if they said, I really don't want to make my relationship with my neighbor any worse, we would honor that and not follow up on it, but we would document their complaint.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you and Grant Jackson and the Oregon Department of Agriculture do to keep us safe. Thank you.